This is Chanel Slater.
And this is Jackie Tracy.
On May 26, 2021, we are recording in the Thomas Park Safe Room in Marion, Iowa. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Denise Joyle.
Awesome. Thank you, Denise. Would you like to be publicly referred to by your first name or first and last name?
Denise will be fine.
Okay. May we either take a photo of you or have a photo of you to accompany the transcript and recording on our website?
Yes.
Thank you. We are planning a Readers Theater event with Giving Tree Theater for August 10th. Would you be willing to potentially have your interview performed?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. First, can you walk me through your connection to Marion?
I moved to Marion in the summer of 2018 because I got remarried, and so I had been here about 2 years before the storm.
Can you walk me through the morning of the Derecho?
The morning of the Derecho, I usually help my husband with our family tree service, and for some reason, I believe he was going to give bids or didn't quite need me as much that morning, so I was spending the morning at home. I knew I had some errands to run, some bills to pay, and I was kind of doing some things around the house, and I believe it was about 9 o'clock that my weather radio went off that we would be having chances of some storms. And living in Iowa all my life, I knew that if there was a watch already at 9 in the morning, that there was a pretty good chance we were going to see a storm. So I was kind of aware of that. I had that in mind. So I got ready right away. And probably about 9:30, I took off in the car and went around and paid some bills, ran some errands. And I was just planning on getting that done, hoping to get that done before any storms came or rain, that type of thing. The other thing that I decided to do that morning was thought, well, if we get some really hard rain, I haven't been out to Low Park to see their flowers. And I thought, I'm going to run out there quick if I have time. So I did go out there about 10:30 and got out of the car and looked around for a while, and I did keep my eye on the sky, and it was an unusual sky. It was like it didn't look like there was a certain place the storm was coming from. I just remember it being pretty slate gray, and I just thought, I don't think I want to spend any more time out here. I think I better head for home. And I think I got into Marion probably about 11:30.
Did you make it home at that point?
I did go home. We do live in a mobile home area, so I was just pulling in to our area, and I heard there was a warning on the radio, and I believe that was the one that said that, I believe it was Atkins or Newhall, had seen 90-mile-an-hour winds. So I immediately just drove right in, and I was thinking, what should I do first? We're going to probably, it might die down, it might not, but I thought, well, what am I going to do? I think I will call my husband because I don't know what he's up to. He could be up in a tree, anything like that. So I called him to let him know that we were going to probably see some bad weather, and pretty soon, because, traveling that fast, 90 miles an hour. So I did that, and then I took all of our plants and anything that was, I think they said that on the warning, anything that might fly away, put it away. I put everything in the garage, and I kind of gathered inside. Like I do take some eye medication. I put that in my purse. I got my phone charger. I got any cash that we had, and I kind of got ready to go to our storm shelter in the community because that's different for me. I've just had 2 years of that, of not having a basement, so I was a little concerned about that. And I kind of gathered some things together, and all the while the weather radio kept going off, and I'm like, do I stop Or do I just keep doing what I'm doing? And I did try to listen, and I just felt like it was probably, it was going to get probably bad here shortly. And when I'd come into the mobile home park, no one that I could see was at our shelter because it's 5 doors down from where we live. And usually I'd be the one that go first because I don't like to wait till the last minute and then kind of have that hurry and scare or getting wet trying to get there. So I noticed there weren't any cars there when I came home. And then I thought, well, I think what I'll do is I'll put our car in the garage. We had one in there already, and I thought, I think it's better to put the car away and walk down. So I did get all ready, and I don't know what time it was that I went, but as I went in the house, I heard the siren go off. So that kind of made me a little more urgent to get there. And I turned around and locked the door, and then being with COVID, that was another concern that I know people had asked about earlier in the summer. Would you go there or would you stay home? Well, I knew I would go if it was a storm, but I couldn't find my mask. And I think it was just because of nerves, because I knew I had it. Well, I couldn't find it, so I had to unlock the door again. And between the time that I unlocked the door and went to get my second mask, it wasn't doing anything when I went in, and when I came out, I could hear and feel that first gust of wind just kind of come up, and so I just took off on a run, and the rain hit, and by the time I got 5 doors down, it was kind of blowing me pretty hard, and I knew I'd make it, but I was like, oh, if I wouldn't have forgot my mask, I'd have been there before I got wet. So by the time I got there, there were cars lining the street, and I got in there, and I think there were at least 50 people in there, and it was kind of unusual. We sat down, and I kind of looked around, and everybody had a mask on except one person, and I thought, well, that's pretty good, because we're probably going to be here for a while. And I was like, I'd rather be here with a storm than, worry about the COVID later. We've got our masks on. So that was the beginning of being in the shelter.
What was the mood like inside the shelter during the storm?
Well, it was very unusual because normally when I've gone to the shelter, there's maybe 20 people there at the most. But every place was lined where you can sit, and it was pretty quiet really at first. People weren't talking and chatting, and that was one thing that I thought about later is, had they gotten information from maybe relatives further away that there was a bad storm coming, because I really didn't know how bad it was going to be. And that was the thing that I noticed was, there wasn't a lot of talking, and we were there for a good 45 minutes, almost an hour. And looking back, that was unusual, that we just all kind of sat and were quiet, and there wasn't a lot, to be said, I guess. It wasn't very long after we were there that the electricity went out, and they did have a backup light, but that shut off the fan, so then it kind of got hot and humid. And of course, I was thinking about where my husband was, and when I had called him, I told him that if the storm came, that I would be at the shelter. He knows me pretty well, that I'd be the first to go. So I knew he knew that I was there, but I wasn't quite sure where he was. So I was definitely thinking about that I hope he's okay, because you can't see anything in there, so you don't know what's happening outside the shelter. You can just hear like the wind and the rain and that type of thing.
And you mentioned having a weather radio. Did you have that with you in the shelter? Were you hearing updates from that?
I did not, and some people had their phones go off, and they would look at it, but nobody really, it wasn't much more than, what you had already heard, that there was a storm coming. It wasn't like minute by minute. So as far as I know, people in the shelter the whole time, we didn't know what was happening, because they're made of concrete, and cell reception is kind of hard in there. So I don't think we really knew what was going on. The only time that, I'm surprised that I wasn't, looking back, I'm surprised I wasn't more worried, because I didn't realize when I was there how long it was taking. It seemed like there'd be gusts of wind, and then it would kind of die down a little bit, and then it would get worse, and then there was a time that there was rain coming in the exhaust type fan. It was coming through that, and the wind was blowing hard enough that it was, like the rain was coming through the cement blocks and kind of where the roof is, and it was running down the walls, and so I knew that there was a pretty strong wind out there, and then we did hear some things hit the roof. And that was when I was like, oh, there's some things blowing around out there, and kind of was like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to find when I go home, you know. At that point, I had no idea it was going to be this bad. When I lived in Vinton, they had a straight line wind. Now they call it a derecho, but at the time they didn't call it that. And they lost, like, I think 70% of their trees. So I had already been through that, and that one was a lot quicker and a lot smaller area, but we kind of had the same result, just on a smaller scale. So after we found out it was a derecho and what was going to happen, no electricity, you couldn't get around, it was exactly like that, only giant scale.
How did you know then when it was safe to leave?
Of course, there were a couple of guys that manned the door, and they would look out once in a while, and you could just tell by the rain that it was pretty much dying down. There didn't seem to be a lot of wind, and then people started leaving in their cars, because after an hour, I think I waited an extra 15 minutes because I had walked down and I really didn't want to get wet going back up. So I waited a little bit longer. So when I came out, I was sure the storm was over, but it did continue to rain for quite a while. So that was my experience in the shelter. And I got to say that everybody got along really well and was calm, and surprisingly, no one was panicked or anything like that. Of course, we had a couple of dogs there too, and you're supposed to have them in kennels, but I don't know if they didn't have time, but they just held them, and I think for the most part, everybody was fine with that. We were just, I think, glad to be safe, so.
What
that's
did you
nice.
see when you first walked out?
Well, when I first walked out, our mobile home area did not get hit as hard as some. But you could see right away there were shingles in the street. They don't have electric wires that are above ground, so that was a good thing. There are no wires above ground. There were the steps that, you know, go up to them. They were tipped over, blown over. There was siding, insulation, the skirting. A lot of people had all their skirting gone. Just a lot of debris, just everywhere. And on the way home, I called my husband to see where he was, and he had been out. He went because there was a pretty bad tree that he had been working with someone to take down, and when I told him the storm was coming, he thought he might have time to do something about it. He went 5 blocks from where our shop is and was up in the aerial lift. What he wanted to do was put ropes on it and kind of secure it together, give it a little more support, and he said he got up there just fine, and he turned around and he said he saw the trees just going back and forth, just being whipped quite a ways away. But when he saw that, he started to come down immediately, and there were limbs above him that were, you know, pretty bad that he was trying to secure. And said when he started to come down, he kept his eye on it, and he saw that one was going to fall, so he got down in his bucket and it hit above him, and then he just tried to stay, you know, in the bucket low and get down. And then as he got down, he kind of got under the truck, and there's controls to pull up the support legs, And he did that, and he said there were limbs falling everywhere. And he only had to go 5 blocks, and he started out, and there were some limbs falling in the street. He had to stop, and there were 2 cars in front of him, and he knew that we were just going to be blocked. So he got out and moved it to one side, and they went through, and then he went through with the truck. And he said it was just blowing terrible, and he just went back to his shop and parked there. He didn't know what else to do, and there were so many limbs coming down, and he set it out there. And that truck is very heavy, so he felt pretty safe there as long as a window didn't get broken. And there are cages above the windshield and everything. And he said that the first wind came through, and then that second one, trees just started snapping everywhere. So when I called him, I was kind of frantic. I will admit that, because I just thought, if it's that bad here, I don't know what's happened everywhere else. And so he asked me if I was all right, because he could tell I was upset. And I said yes. And he said, I'll come home. And he didn't tell me there were trees down everywhere. And so when he went to leave, he had, of course, good thing is he had all those saws with him. He was able to cut himself out, but it took him probably, I don't know, 35 minutes to get where it should be a drive of 5 minutes. So I had to cut all that out and come home. And I was glad to see him, I can tell you that. And then he drove his bucket truck home, and he helped me kind of gather up our skirting and kind of look at the house, make sure nothing was leaking. And we didn't have a lot of damage, but we had debris everywhere that wasn't ours. But you just kind of had to be careful of that. And then after we kind of decided everything was okay, he said, I got to take off. And he had told me that before the storm was even over, because it went from southwest to Marion, he said he had 12 calls already while he was sitting there, and the truck was whipping back and forth. And he told them, I'm in the middle of it, I'll take your name and number. And by that evening, we had like 167 calls, just in those few hours. And we knew then that it was going to go crazy. And one of the calls he had, when he knew the people, and he knew there was a lot down, and he just said, I'm going to take off, and I'll probably be back at dark. And I started picking up things in the driveway, that kind of thing, just trying to at least clear that so we could get in the house and be able to drive in. So that was kind of the first day, and we knew there wouldn't be power for a while. So,
Do you have a role in the business?
I do. At the time, because of COVID, I had been helping him. So he just went out on his own because just of what had happened, and at home, I kind of needed to take care of things, but he was going to do as much as he could that night. And he worked until probably about dark. And really all he did was emergency stuff, clear a driveway, something, was on the roof. He would, just get that down and just leave it in the yard. And of course, just going from place to place, someone would see him and, can you help us, and that kind of thing. So that was kind of our first day.
How were you both able to field all those calls and decide which seems like it's the biggest emergency while I'm sure you're working nonstop?
What we did was we tried to ask, is it a danger to anyone of like falling on the house roof? If it was a garage, we said, we'll put you on a list. Or if it's in the backyard, we'll put you on a list, but we're not going to be coming out. We're going to do anything through a house or on a house, or it may fall on the house. That was our kind of our criteria. Mm-hmm. Or a driveway that they couldn't get their car out. And that's kind of how we started out. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty hard to manage because when I went out and helped him, then there was no one to answer the phone. So it was all messages and missed calls. So usually when we got home, I tried to call people back the best I could. And I usually tried to get that done before it got dark. I'd sit outside with our cell phone, and then I could, have a notebook and stuff and just try to write things down.
What were those conversations like?
Everybody was just, first of all, they were really happy somebody actually called them back or answered the phone. And then they just were really desperate, like if it was through their house, a lot of it we could just say like, how big is the tree? And like we knew right away, you're gonna need a crane service, which we don't have, you know, and just to have to tell them, and then they're like, well, who do we try? And we had a couple that we could, you know, suggest at the beginning, but then it got to the point where I remember we went to give a bid somewhere and we said, you're gonna need a crane. They're like, I've tried everywhere. And we turned around and we said, there's a crane right there. Go chase them down. And they did. They got in their truck and just took off and followed them. And I think they said that they did come back and help them. So it was just kind of crazy and just hard to keep up. We just kept trying to do the best we could, and we knew we couldn't get everybody. We knew that somewhere there'd be lost messages or something scribbled on a note, or sometimes there'd be, you know, we'd give a bid and here comes, you know, 5 or 6 neighbors, and there was a lot of people would stop maybe and help them and then say they'd come back, and then they never did. And so, and we also went back, and that was okay because we wanted people to get help. Sometimes we go back and they got somebody from Minnesota, so it was a very crazy time, but we just had to do the best we could. And I think we probably got 600 or 700 calls eventually, and we still have probably a couple hundred people that still want us to come out. It was things that could wait, but we did take care of the, you know, we felt like we took care of the people that needed it, that had holes in their roof before that first rain. We had that good weather. And so we felt really good about being able to help people get those patched up, and the best we could anyway. If they had called us, we felt like we got through that list, and that was a good feeling.
How was record keeping during that time? How did you even keep track of invoices and all the jobs that you had to do?
Well, we don't use a computer. My husband's always done it by hand, and so I had kind of had that first year of helping him out. So we just took it all down, and I tried to categorize it by southeast, northwest. I had those stacks. I had Marion. I had Alburnett. Just kind of my own system of where I could find it, and then last names, and I would just look it up that way. So I'd been doing it that way, so it worked pretty well.
How was it managing your own stress and the loss of property and damage in your community, and then trying to help all these other people too?
Well, fortunately, we didn't have a lot of loss ourselves. Just a few minor things. We didn't have our roof looked at, and we're actually having that taken care of now because there just wasn't really much visible damage at all. We knew it was okay, and we just had a couple of outdoor lights broken. We had our tree. It was a smaller tree. It came down in the back, and the community had that removed for us, so we didn't have to worry about that. The one thing that we did have to worry about was we immediately knew the next morning that the pickup had hardly any gas in it. And that's the second vehicle we take that has all the saws and everything in it. And then the other problem was I needed to find some ice for our freezer so we didn't lose. And we just have a small freezer, but we really didn't want to lose anything if we didn't have to. So the next morning, my job was to find gas and some ice. And somebody said that Fleet Farm had gas for a while. And I got in the pickup, and I didn't even get through Marion, and the light went on for the gas. And I was like, I'll never make it. I'll sit over there, and I'll run out of gas. And my husband was already out working. I thought, sometimes he doesn't even answer the phone when he's busy. I can't let that happen. So I turned around, and I had a car in the garage that I had previously owned, and it had gas in it. So I went to our shop and I got 3 gas cans. So we needed gas for the pickup, and eventually we were going to need it for the bucket truck and for our saws. So I started out and I went, I headed out towards Palo, thinking and that's the thing, I didn't realize even then, because we didn't have a TV, I didn't realize how widespread this was. So I headed towards Palo and found out I couldn't get to Shellsburg because I'm from Vinton. I thought those are the places I know. So I cut across and went to, I believe it was Walker. Couldn't get any there. Then I went on to Center Point. Well, there was a truck there for fuel, but they weren't unloading because they didn't have any electricity there. So the good part about that was they were getting rid of all their ice because it was going to melt. So I was able to grab ice there. I went up to Central City and Lefty's was closed, and I got up to Manchester. I called a friend that I used to know there, and she said, no, we didn't have any damage. Come up. So I got there, and I was able to fill my gas cans and my car while I was there. Got there, and because of all the stuff that had happened, they couldn't use a credit card. It wasn't working. I had $35 of cash in my purse. So I learned a lesson there. Always keep quite a bit of cash and take it with you if there's a problem like that. That was our lesson. The other lesson was don't leave your trucks and stuff without gas in them. So we've been pretty good about that. That's a lesson learned. And so that I was able to get gas. I came back on 13, saw Lefty's was open, went home. We got the gas cans. I poured gas in our pickup, took off with the pickup. I waited for an hour on the highway to get gas. We got every gas can we could. Got gas for the saws and for the bucket truck, which is going to take quite a bit. So we were able to get that filled up, and I filled up the pickup, and I went back home. And I think I had the ice. Then I was trying to kind of figure out that business. By then it was late afternoon, and I really don't remember. The days honestly kind of began to blur. The next morning I do remember that my husband went to work and went out past the Casey's on Collins, and he said, they're up and running. Get whatever car needs gas again and some gas cans, go over there. So I went over there and I waited 30 minutes and I was able to get more gas there. So that, we felt like gas stations were starting to open up. So we thought we were going to be okay with that. So we felt a little bit relieved there. And then things kind of got to be a little more on a routine. Lots of calls during the day. That I was calling back and just trying to manage at home, like food and that type of thing. Just making sure we had what we needed. We did have a good food supply because of COVID, so we didn't really have to worry about that. It was just the matter of actually fixing it and sending it or taking it over where he was working. So that's kind of how things worked with that. I do remember the first time I had to go pick him up, which was probably the third or fourth day. He called me about 5 and said, I've got so much more work to do. I want you to come and help me, and then I'm going to just come home in the car. We'll leave the truck so we're not using gas. And I went over. He told me how to get there, and it was on 32nd Street. I think it's northeast. And he said, you're going to have to take certain roads. And when I started into some of those places, I just couldn't believe it. There was a couple places where it was like a tunnel with my little car. And he said, you're going to take a corner here, and there was a power line just down. And I just felt like it was just a disaster. It was that way everywhere. And that was the first I really saw the extent of it. I kind of had heard about it, and then after that I went out more and more and was driving different places, and I just had a hard time believing some of the apartments I saw. That how did people even survive? I was amazed that we didn't have more loss of life. I know there was someone down by Ely that was out, and that happened, but yeah, it could have been so much worse.
So what were your work hours like then after the Derecho?
We usually were up with the light. Sometimes people will call us at 5:30 in the morning they were so desperate to get somebody to answer the phone. They'd apologize, but they're like, we knew if we were gonna get you, it'd be early, and we're like, that's okay, we're up, and we usually worked until dark. There was, like, you've got to sharpen saws and things like that, and sometimes I had to go get, like, bar oil. That was another challenge of everybody was buying bar oil that goes on the saw and in it. So I was running around looking for that, trying to get it online, and we were able to get, I don't remember where we got it, but we were able to get some, and that kind of was like, okay, that'll get us by for a little while, and then we were able to get some more. I think that stores saw that we really need it, and that was something they could get then. That didn't really have anything to do with COVID or anything like that. But we worked hard, just so, just desperation. People were desperate. A couple of the things that we did, and I feel really good about it, is there was a lady that was kind of physically challenged, and I'm not really sure. She had a phone that just hardly did anything, and her insurance company wanted her to take pictures. Well, she couldn't even get out of the house, and we started running into that. We met an elderly gentleman. He had a giant tree on his garage and on his house and everything, and you know, he was like 80 something, and they're like, well, we need you to send pictures and send this by email. He didn't have a computer. So what we did was we'd have them call the insurance, and I would talk to them, and I'd give them our email, our business email, and I'd say, send what you need, the number, write it all down, and we'll take pictures, we'll send that if that's okay. And they were perfectly fine with that. And so we did that for a couple of people, and that turned out really well for them, because I don't know what they would have done otherwise. They just didn't have anybody to help them. So, you know, I was glad to be able to do that, because I had the skills to do it, and the technology and everything. And so that worked out well for them.
So you're working from sunup until sundown. How long did that work schedule, how long was that?
I would say we did that until that first rain, and I can't tell you when that was. It seems like it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I'm not sure about that. There were times like we would just take a break somewhere during the day. We had to go and give bids too, so that was kind of like a rest. So that was happening too. But until that first rain, we worked pretty hard, and then it didn't seem so urgent, because we had covered everything that needed to be done, that would be a real problem if it had rained before that happened. So after that, we did continue to work almost every day, because we're not attending church because of COVID. Every day was the same, so we did continue to work. We didn't work from sun up to sundown, but we put in a good day's work. We always did something, some type of work. And I made my husband take his birthday off. We did that at the end of September, and then we pretty much worked every day, as long as it wasn't raining or too snowy. We did work one day in the snow, taking a tree down that they just one day went out, and it's like it's making a terrible creaking noise, and it had a split afterwards. So that continued to happen. That things got worse for people. We had quite a few of those. So it was snowing, and we did that, and then we worked up until December 24th, and then we decided it's getting too cold, it's slippery. We've done more than most people would do. We're just gonna just wait for nicer days. So that's kind of how long we worked.
Tell me about your husband's birthday. What was that like?
Well, we went fishing. He had been wanting to go fishing for quite some time, and I said, that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna go fishing. And we went up to Central City, to Pinnakin Ridge, and we went fishing there for a couple hours, and then We went somewhere else, but I can't tell you where we went. We went and had something to eat and probably had pie and that kind of stuff. So we just enjoyed the day. So that was a real treat.
How
And
did it feel to have that break?
really, really good. Really good. Seemed like the day lasted forever. And, but you still had that in the back of your mind. Oh, we need to get more done. We just need to get it done. But that was a good thing to do. So we enjoyed it and we're glad, looking back, we're glad we did that.
So you paused some tree work on December 24th. When did you start up again in 2021?
I think it was probably the end of February or March. We just started doing the smaller jobs that, you could go out when it kind of got warmed up, maybe around noon, and you knew you'd get done by 2 or 3 o'clock. And we also started making calls to see if people still needed us, where they were at. We had some people call, say they had it taken care of. Some people that had the hangers up there, that was just like one hanger. Sometimes it had fallen down in the winds and stuff. A lot of times people had changed their mind. I don't think we'll take that tree down. It looks pretty good. Some people called and said, it looks terrible. We're going to have that taken down. Right now what we're seeing is people calling about the remaining log that's standing there. That wasn't a problem. They got everything done they needed to do, or the curbside stuff that didn't get picked up. So we can pick that up. And so that's kind of where we're at. And of course we've had some new things too that have popped up, but we're just trying to make our way through that list. And we've just decided that they've waited that long, and if they wanted to wait, they'll still wait and it'll be there. And if not, that's okay too, because it's been a lot.
Absolutely. Do you think that it still seems as urgent right now as it was in 2020, or do you think things are a little bit calmer?
Most of the people that we deal with, it's not as urgent. No, it's not as urgent. They're okay with it. And the only thing that makes it urgent is if they're getting a new fence or something put in, and they've got that date now. That makes it a little bit urgent. So we usually try to take care of that and get that done.
Jackie, do you have any questions?
You had discussed having the food in your freezer. Did you have food all along, or did you run into a situation where you were running low on food or anything like that? Or did you need any resources for yourself?
Well, as I said, we had quite a supply because of COVID, so we had that type of food. Ice was probably the one thing that we really wanted to keep our meat, and we had fish too. And we did. I took extra effort. That was another thing that took my time, is trying to find ice. And I do remember I called Hy-Vee in Marion, and they quit doing this after I talked to them. They told me when the truck would come, and I went over there, and there was already a line from the front to the back. And I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to get any. So when we got up there, this is the bad part of things like this. They had called the police because someone was arguing about it wasn't fair. Something wasn't fair about maybe they had stood in line, maybe they knew they were out of ice and they weren't going to get any. And then after that, when I called, they said, we're going to get some, but we don't know when. So I think that was the end of letting people know when there was going to be ice. But I did get ice that night, and that was, I think, the last time I had to go get ice. We had everything we needed. It was a little bit inconvenient to not have the things that maybe you wanted, especially when you had so little time to take care of things and have something to eat. It's been nice to have some cold milk or something in there, but we just kind of made do with what we had. And of course, you couldn't get any food anywhere else, like sometimes, you know, when you're out working, you just stop at the closest place and get something to eat. So I think I sent some lunches, and then people were so nice. There were other people using up their like frozen meats and stuff. So my husband actually had some burgers a few places, and the ladies make coffee and bring him stuff out. So that worked out pretty well. But at home, we did really well. We didn't lack for anything. I know that others were not so fortunate. And we tried to like not, we could have taken advantage of a lot of things, but we tried not to. There was one day that we did stop and get some food because we just needed something quick. And we felt like that was okay to do at one time, but other people needed it so much more than we did.
The other question I have is, you talked about taking the day off for your husband's birthday. Did you do anything else for self-care? Because it sounds like you were busy a lot. What did you do for you?
I would say the best part of our day was getting cleaned up. And that first, we were without power for 9 days, so we didn't have hot water. We didn't have a gas hot water heater. So for me, I like to take baths, so I just heated water on the gas stove. But my poor husband, he had to take kind of a shower that was not as warm as maybe he would like it. But I think that we did a lot of talking at the end of the day, and we were tired too, so that, you know, we slept well, and just that, I don't know, I think we get along pretty well, and I think that we were able to talk things over the day, how the day had gone, and we are people of faith, so we just felt like we had been blessed. Maybe the reason we didn't have damage was so we could help other people, so we just felt really good about being in that position, that we weren't struggling at home with maybe, you know, no place to live or something, or our shop completely demolished or something like that, that we felt pretty blessed that we could keep going, and just had that kind of that attitude. We knew it wouldn't last forever, so just kind of that, you know, just when you know something's going to end, you can kind of do a lot, but it's when you don't know if it's going to end, it's harder to deal with. So
I think that's all I had.
Did you have anything you wanted to add I haven't asked about?
The only thing I would add is I had a couple of thoughts that I'm sure other people had instances like this. I really wasn't traumatized by the storm, but I remember one day going north on Highway 13. I'm not sure where I was going, and I think it was probably like 3 months afterwards, and that would have been in the fall, maybe even close to winter. And a big gust of wind came up and kind of moved the car, and just for that second, I had that, you know, I kind of physically went, oh, I kind of scared me. Like it was almost like not a flashback, but just kind of that uneasy, like, oh my goodness, that's wind. And so that, I'm sure a lot of people had that. Anytime that first storm came afterwards, I'm sure they were really, really worried. And then one of the most unusual things that we noticed was at home, it was unusual, we thought, that our 2 outside lights, the fixtures got broken, because one is under an overhang like a porch, and we thought something had to come through there, but it didn't seem to hit anything else. But the odd thing was we had 3 hummingbird feeders that were just on S-hooks, and every one of them was still hanging. They were just there, and that was kind of just the unusual things that we kind of laughed about that later, and we didn't even think about it till quite a while later. I think my husband said, "What happened to the hummingbird feeders?" I said, "They're still there. They were perfect." It's like, how did they make it? And I said, "I don't know, but they were still there." So other than that, I can't really think of anything else. I don't want to go through it again. I'm hoping that we have good weather and no more storms like that, so.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'll stop the
welcome.
recording now.